So, when and how to disclose AI use in academic publishing. AAME Guide number 192. It's a very good article written on generative artificial intelligence, and we will overview what are the roles for disclosing AI in harnessing.
Information for a living right now because the tools used to generate text have evolved from frame this around a really important concept that they call establishing a fairer footing.
A fairer footing. What does that mean in this context?
Well, what's fascinating here is that this concept addresses a long-standing structural imbalance in global research. Because, the predominant language of scientific, medical, and educational literature is English.
Right. It's an English first club.
Exactly. So if a researcher is operating out of a university in the global south or just any region where English is not the primary language, they face an immediate steep disadvantage.
Because they have to translate everything.
Right. Their actual research might be methodologically flawless, but if the phrasing in their manuscript does not match the specific and honestly often rigid stylistic expectations of a Western English language journal, they face a much higher rate of rejection.
It's totally unfair. It's like asking people to run a marathon, but telling half the runners they have to wear heavy boots because they aren't native English speakers.
That's a great way to put it.
And the native speakers get high-end running shoes. Generative AI is suddenly offering those disadvantaged researchers the running shoes. It translates, it smooths out the syntax, it just bridges that massive linguistic gap almost instantly. But is it fair if we then penalize them for wearing the shoes?
Well, what's fascinating here is how that analogy holds up. The running shoes analogy works great for grammar, but it kind of breaks down when we look at the underlying logic of how these models actually operate.
Okay, how so?
Because a running shoe doesn't change the path you run, but an LLM might subtly change the actual argument a non-native speaker is making, just to sound more like Western English-centric research.
Wait, really? It alters the argument itself?
Yeah, because these models are trained heavily on Western data. So when a researcher asks the AI to just, polish their English, the AI isn't just fixing subject-verb agreement, it is often rewriting the text to match the semantic patterns of its training data.
Oh, wow.
So the tension here is whether we are actually helping these scholars express their unique perspectives, or if the AI is inadvertently erasing their cultural voice just to make it palatable to an English-speaking editor.
That is a critical distinction. The tool is acting as a cultural filter, not just a grammatical one.
Exactly.
But assuming the researcher is carefully managing that filter, the AI is undeniably democratizing the actual writing process for a lot of people.
It absolutely is.
So if the AI is doing so much of the heavy lifting, like if it is brainstorming the ideas, structuring the methodology section, and doing the translating, a lot of people are asking a very logical question. Why don't we just list the AI as a co-author on the paper?
Yeah, and that debate flared up immediately after the release of ChatGPT. Some early papers actually did list ChatGPT in the author block.
I remember seeing a few of those.
Right. But international guidance bodies moved incredibly fast to shut that down. I mean, the Committee on Publication Ethics, the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, and major academic publishers like Taylor and Francis all issued strict guidelines prohibiting the listing of AI tools as authors.
I want to push on the logic of that prohibition for a second. Let's play devil's advocate.
Sure.
If I'm an executive and I hire a highly skilled, brilliant human ghostwriter to draft a 50-page annual report based on my notes, I review it, I sign my name to it, but we still acknowledge the ghostwriter's existence. They get paid, they get a nod.
Right, they are acknowledged.
Well, an AI is basically untiring ghostwriter. If an AI writes 90% of the text in a scientific paper, refusing to name it as an author kind of feels like human ego. So what does this all mean? Are we just protecting our territory?
It's a fair question, but defining authorship strictly by who generated the most words fundamentally misunderstands the legal and professional function of a byline in scientific literature.
Okay, how so?
The prohibition against AI authorship really has nothing to do with technical capability or human ego. It is entirely about scholarly accountability.
Accountability.
Right. When you put your name on a published piece of research, you are assuming legal, moral, and professional liability for every single claim in that document.
Right. If there's a mistake, you have to answer the emails when someone finds a flaw in your methodology.
Exactly. And it goes much further than just answering emails. You have to formally approve the final manuscript. You have to legally declare any conflicts of interest.
Which a computer obviously can't do.
Precisely. If it turns out the data in the paper was fabricated or a patient was harmed because of a flawed clinical recommendation you published, your reputation, your career, and potentially your legal standing are on the line.
That makes a lot of sense.
A machine cannot bear liability. You cannot fire an algorithm. An LLM cannot manage a conflict of interest. It cannot feel professional shame, and it cannot be held legally accountable for fraud.
Right, because it is a piece of software, not a legal entity.
Right.
So you can't sue ChatGPT.
Exactly. Acknowledging that software assisted you is fundamentally different from granting it authorship. Authorship is essentially a contract of liability. Therefore, the human author must remain fully responsible for the accuracy and originality of the work.
Even if the machine wrote most of it.
Even if the AI generated 95% of the text.
Okay. But if the human has to take all the responsibility, that introduces a massive vulnerability for you. Because what exactly are you taking responsibility for?
That's the terrifying part.
This leads right into the immense risks of relying on AI, specifically accuracy, bias, and privacy. The source material explicitly warns that any output from an AI must be treated as unverified notes, not finished scholarship.
And that requires a complete shift in how we traditionally view computational output. For decades, we have viewed computers as calculators.
Like an adding machine.
Exactly. If you type a complex equation into Excel, you expect the absolute objective mathematical truth as an output. You do not double check Excel's math.
Never. I just trust it blindly.
We all do. But large language models are not calculators. They do not compute objective truth. They predict language. They calculate the statistical probability of which word should follow the previous word based on patterns of their training data.
Which is the exact mechanism that leads to hallucinations, right?
Yes, exactly. The AI will completely fabricate references, quotes, and data with absolute linguistic confidence.
Because it's designed to sound plausible, not to be factually accurate.
Right, it's a very convincing liar.
The source mentions studies showing that these models frequently invent academic citations completely out of thin air.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
Like a researcher might ask the AI for a literature review on a specific topic, and the AI will output this beautifully formatted list of sources. Gives you a real sounding author name, a highly relevant paper title, a legitimate journal name, and even a fabricated DOI number.
And it looks perfectly real.
Exactly. If you don't actually click the link or search the database, you would never know the paper doesn't actually exist. So authors are now forced to manually verify every single quote, stat, and line of code.
And that manual verification process brings us to the issue of plagiarism, or what the source terms agerism.
Agerism, that's a clever term.
It is, because LLMs do not adhere to academic attribution norms. They do not understand the concept of intellectual property at all. They have ingested millions of texts, and when they generate an output, they blend those statistical patterns together without citing the original human creators.
So if you copy and paste AI's output directly into your manuscript, you might be inadvertently plagiarizing a human author whose work the AI scraped during its training phase.
Yes. You could even end up self-plagiarizing your own previous work if the model happened to ingest your past publications.
That is wild. And beyond plagiarism, there's the issue of bias. Because it learns from historic data, it just perpetuates whatever bias was in that data.
Right. Exactly. It functions as a mirror reflecting the historical prejudices present in that training data. The AME guide cites a really striking study to illustrate this.
Oh, the DLE3 study.
Yeah. Researchers asked DLE3, which is a generative AI image tool, to create images representing Australian medical students.
And the results were just drastically skewed. I mean, 92% of the individuals in the generated images had light skin.
Right.
And nearly 59% were male. That is a gross misrepresentation of the actual demographic reality of Australian medical students today.
And the mechanism behind that result is crucial to understand. DLE3 did not consciously decide to exclude certain demographics. It doesn't have intent.
It's just doing math.
Exactly. It generated those images based on the billions of images and associated text tags it was trained on. Historically, medical literature and stock photography have overrepresented white male subjects in the role of doctors. The AI simply looked at the historical statistical distribution and replicated it.
It assumes the historical baseline is the permanent reality.
Right. And if a human researcher is using these tools to generate visual aids or to synthesize data on patient populations, and they do not actively interrogate the AI's output, they will inadvertently hard-code those historical inaccuracies back into modern research.
So verification is no longer just checking your own math or checking a citation. It requires auditing a machine's logic to see what data it is silently excluding.
That's a perfect way to summarize it.
Well, that covers the risk of the output. But there is an equally severe risk on the input side, data privacy.
Oh, this is a massive issue.
Let's say you are a researcher conducting a clinical study. You have a massive document of interview transcripts from vulnerable patients or proprietary data about a new drug trial. The instinct is to drop that 50-page document into a public LLM and ask it to summarize the key themes.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
Right, because the moment you paste that text into the prompt box, you might be violating confidentiality agreements.
The terms of service for many public generative AI tools explicitly state that user inputs can be used to train future versions of the model.
Right, it's right there in the fine print nobody reads.
Exactly. So if you input raw, anonymized patient data or confidential institutional protocols, you're essentially transmitting restricted information to a third-party technology company.
Let's pull this out of academia to look at the real-world application for you, the listener. Imagine you are a mid-level manager at a company.
Okay.
You record a highly confidential quarterly strategy meeting. You run the audio through a transcription software, and then you paste the transcript into a public AI tool to generate a summary for your team. You have just uploaded your company's proprietary strategy, specific financial targets, and internal weaknesses into a data set that might be used to train the next version of the AI.
Which means 6 months from now, an employee at a rival company could ask that same AI tool, what are the common weaknesses in current business strategies?
Wow, yeah.
And the AI might generate an answer that closely mirrors the exact proprietary information you uploaded.
That is terrifying. So the guide emphasizes that anyone handling sensitive data must verify with their institutional review boards or IT security teams to ensure their tools operate within a closed environment.
Right, an environment that does not train on user data.
Okay, so we have established that AI is a massive liability regarding accuracy, bias, and privacy. This brings us to the immense complexity of regulating it. Because to write a rule about AI, you first have to define what actually counts as AI use.
And the lines there are incredibly murky.
Yeah, the boundary between human writing and machine writing is just disappearing.
The guide attempts to categorize this by drawing a line between AI-assisted content and AI-generated content.
Okay, what's the difference?
AI-assisted content generally refers to work where the human authored the initial text but utilized AI to polish it.
So like fixing grammar or spelling.
Exactly, improving syntactic flow, that sort of thing. The human remains firmly in control of the ideation and the initial framing. And most journal policies currently treat this like an advanced spell checker and do not mandate explicit disclosure.
Okay, but AI-generated content is the other side of the line.
Right. This is text where the initial draft was created by the AI based on a prompt. Even if the human author goes back and heavily revises that text later, the seed of the paragraph originated from the machine.
And usually that requires disclosure.
In almost all current academic policies, yes, AI-generated content requires explicit disclosure.
But here's where it gets really interesting. How do you define the origin of the text once the editing process begins? Because the line between assistance and generation is practically impossible to enforce once an author starts revising.
It's a complete gray area.
Let's test the boundary with the ship of Theseus analogy.
Oh, I love this.
For those who don't know, it's a classic philosophical thought experiment. If you take a wooden ship and over the course of 10 years you replace every single rotting plank with a new piece of wood, is it still the same ship at the end?
Right.
Let's apply that to a manuscript. I prompt an AI to write a paragraph summarizing a scientific concept. It spits out 5 sentences. It is clearly AI generated. I need to disclose it.
Yes, under current guidelines, that is a clear-cut generation.
But what if I read the AI's paragraph and I delete one sentence because I think it's weak? Then I change 3 adjectives. Then I rewrite the concluding sentence to sound more like my own voice.
Okay, so you're actively editing.
Right. I've now altered 50% of the text. Is it still AI generated? What if I spend a week editing and I eventually replace every single word the AI originally generated, but I retain the underlying logical structure and the sequence of arguments the AI suggested?
You replaced all the planks.
Exactly. I replaced all the planks one by one over a week. At what point does the AI's idea become my writing? Is it still the AI ship?
This is the exact dilemma journal editors are facing right now. And the authors of the AME guide address this by looking at the concept of continuity. They ask how much continuity of the original AI text remains in the final product.
But there's no objective metric to measure continuity of thought versus continuity of syntax, right?
None. Because there is no universal answer, individual journal policies are fracturing. They are highly inconsistent and constantly evolving.
The source outlines just how chaotic this is right now. It's wild. For instance, the Journal of the American Medical Association, JMA, has a policy stating you do not have to disclose basic grammar checks, but essentially any other use needs to be reported.
Right.
But then Springer Nature has taken a hardline stance, completely prohibiting any generative AI images from being published in their journals, regardless of how much human prompting was involved.
And meanwhile, the journal Nature has stated that AI-assisted copy editing does not need to be declared because they believe it does not involve autonomous content creation.
The inconsistency creates a total labyrinth for researchers. And the gray area gets even darker when you look at complex prompting. What happens if an author uploads their own human-generated notes and uses specific prompts to have the AI write them into a specific textual form?
Right, like if a researcher spends 3 months taking meticulous original field notes, they have 20 pages of raw human-generated observations. They upload their own notes into an LLM and instruct the AI to organize those notes into a standard methodology section.
The ideas are 100% human.
Exactly, but the actual sequence of the words was generated by the machine. So is that assistance or is that generation?
It's a hybrid that current definitions struggle to categorize. And because policies are a moving target, the guide strongly recommends a golden rule for all authors. Disclose when in doubt.
Disclose when in doubt, it's the safest approach.
It is a safe legal strategy. But I want to dig into the philosophical why. Because right now, the entire system relies on an honor code. There is no software that can accurately detect if an AI wrote a heavily edited paragraph. So why do readers actually need to know if an AI was involved?
Well, the foundational pillars of scientific publishing are transparency, integrity, and accountability. Readers and editors need transparency to critically evaluate the manuscript.
Sure, but the AME guide introduces a much deeper, more philosophical threshold for when disclosure is necessary, don't they?
They do. They argue disclosure is warranted whenever an AI tool materially shapes the research or the manuscript.
And what does materially shapes actually mean in practice?
They define this as an epistemic threshold. Epistemology is a branch of philosophy concerned with the theory of knowledge. It asks how we know what we know, how we validate facts, and how we justify our beliefs.
Right, the study of truth, basically.
Exactly. The authors of the guide argue that AI has crossed a line from being a passive tool to becoming an active participant in the creation and transformation of knowledge.
This is where we need to draw a sharp contrast. A microscope is a tool. A researcher uses a microscope to look at a cell. The microscope magnifies reality, but it doesn't interpret it.
Right. The human looks through the lens and makes a judgment.
The microscope is totally passive. But an LLM isn't just magnifying data.
No, an LLM acts as an interpreter. The guide states that even though AI completely lacks human agency or consciousness, it now functions as the originator of our beliefs and their content.
That is a massive paradigm shift. If you ask an LLM to conduct a literature review on a controversial topic, it might scan 1,000 papers and summarize 50 of them. The AI has just made an editorial decision.
It decided which 50 papers represent the reality of the topic, and it silently excluded 950 others based on the opaque weighting of its algorithms.
The AI acted as a gatekeeper of knowledge. If an AI structured your core argument or decided which literature to summarize, it shaped how you view the truth of your subject. The reader desperately needs to know the lens through which the data was processed.
Exactly. If a human does a literature review, they have inherent biases, but we can evaluate a human's methodology. We can look at a machine's output, but we cannot easily audit the exact statistical weights that led it to prioritize one paper over another.
Think about this from the perspective of reading a news article. You'd want to know if a human reporter interviewed sources, or if an AI scraped the internet and hallucinated the quotes. It changes how much you trust the core claims.
Absolutely. The presence of the machine materially changes the epistemological nature of the document. You have to know who or what originated the claims to evaluate their validity.
This brings up a major behavioral problem highlighted in the source, because we are talking at length about telling the public and the journals about AI use. But the guide points out a pervasive issue happening internally, before the paper is even submitted.
Right, happening behind closed doors.
Researchers are routinely hiding their AI use from their own co-authors.
The guide refers to this as a lack of internal disclosure. Early literature on AI adoption shows that explicit conversations about AI use are simply not happening early in the project lifecycle.
Why not, though? I mean, if a team is overwhelmed with data, and one researcher figures out how to use an AI to code data in half the time, you would think they would be eager to share that with the team.
You would think so, but they hide it because of what the authors identify as the disclosure penalty.
The disclosure penalty.
Yeah. Despite the widespread adoption we discussed earlier, there is still a deep-seated stigma attached to using AI for intellectual work. Authors hesitate to tell their colleagues because they fear professional judgment.
They think it's cheating.
Exactly. They worry that if they reveal they used ChatGPT to draft a literature review, their peers will question the legitimacy of the work, the creativity of their insights, or their actual intellectual contribution.
It's essentially academic guilt. It's like hosting a dinner party. You make a beautiful cake from a boxed mix, but you hide the box in the trash before your guests arrive because you want them to think you spent hours measuring flour.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Right. But in science, hiding the box mix can get your whole team's paper retracted.
It creates catastrophic ethical liabilities. Because if a junior researcher uses an AI to generate a section, fails to verify the citations, and never tells the lead author might submit that paper to a major journal.
And when the peer reviewers eventually discover that the citations are totally hallucinated, the paper gets retracted. And the entire team's reputation is permanently damaged because of an undisclosed ethical violation.
The guide emphasizes that research teams must implement deliberate steps to normalize these conversations. They cannot be treated as confessions of guilt. They need to be normalized as standard methodological planning, just like discussing who gets to be first author.
Normalizing it strips away the shame and ensures everyone is legally protected. So let's assume a researcher overcomes the internal stigma. They have the conversation with their lab and they are ready to submit the paper. They know they need to disclose their AI use to the journal. The problem is, how do you actually write that disclosure without it sounding like you're confessing to a crime?
Authors frequently fall into the trap of writing defensive, vague disclosures. The AME guide stresses that disclosing AI use should be treated as routine, unemotional methodological reporting.
Okay, so keep it clinical.
Exactly. If a researcher uses Microsoft Excel to generate a scatter plot, they do not write a paragraph apologizing for not doing the math by hand. They simply state the software and the version used as a factual component. AI disclosure must adopt that same tone.
To structure this, the guide initially references the Weaver Artificial Intelligence Disclosure Framework, known as the 8 framework, which breaks disclosure down into the who, what, why, and how much of AI involved.
But the authors of this specific source document go further. They propose their own framework specifically for health professions education research, which they call the AIH Peer Framework.
The AIH Peer Framework. And this includes 8 key practices, right?
Right, 8 distinct practices for comprehensive disclosure. The first practice is to specify the exact model and the specific version used. Simply writing, we use ChatGPT is functionally useless to a reader.
Right, because ChatGPT 3.5 from 2022 is a completely different mechanism than a model like GPT-4 or Gemini Advanced. They have drastically different parameters and hallucination rates. So you have to say, we utilize ChatGPT version 4.0.
Exactly. The second practice requires detailing the specific activities the AI performed. Don't just say, we used AI for coding. In a research context, coding could mean writing a Python script, or it could mean qualitative analysis of interview transcripts.
The reader has to know exactly what the machine touched. So say, we utilized AI to extract recurring themes from patient feedback.
The third practice addresses the data privacy issue. You must declare if participant consent was obtained for uploading data. Did the patient consent to their transcript being processed by a third-party server?
Makes sense. And the fourth practice is related, indicating the specific steps taken to protect that data. Like, did you go into the settings and turn off the improve the model for everyone feature?
Right, it proves you actively manage the privacy. Now, the fifth practice introduces a concept that is truly fascinating: negative disclosure.
Oh, I love this part.
It suggests explicitly stating when AI was not used, particularly in phases where a reader might logically suspect it was.
It's fascinating that we are entering an era where you have to explicitly state a human actually thought of this part. Like, an LLM was used to format the references, but was not used to generate the interpretive analysis. It highlights the areas of research we still consider sacred to human intellect.
We are defining the value of human intellect by explicitly stating what tasks we deny the machine. The sixth practice is to reference the specific journal or institutional policies you are following.
Just to show you read the rules.
Exactly. The seventh practice is making a final statement assuming full responsibility. Even if there isn't a checkbox, write a declarative sentence. The HUMI authors assume full responsibility for the accuracy and integrity of all content.
You are formally signing the contract of authorship.
And the final, eighth practice is to keep records of the prompts. Maintain an audit trail, save the PDF of the chat log, or share a link to the conversation. If anyone questions the origin of the data, you can prove how the AI was directed.
The framework is incredibly thorough, but the guide also explicitly lists what authors should avoid doing, what not to do. Don't write vague disclosures like, we use ChatGPT for research. That tells the reader nothing about the epistemic impact of the tool.
Vague disclosures are essentially virtue signaling. You're trying to check a compliance box, but providing no meaningful information. And don't apologize or be overly defensive. Just state the facts.
All right, so we have established incredibly strict rules, philosophical boundaries, and detailed frameworks holding the human authors accountable. But what happens when the paper is finally submitted and the peer reviewers evaluating the work want to use AI to speed up their own jobs?
This creates one of the most intense points of friction in the current publishing ecosystem. Using generative AI in the peer review process is heavily discouraged and often strictly prohibited by journals.
Like Academic Medicine and MedPortal.
Right. The primary reason for that ban is confidentiality. When a human author submits a manuscript for peer review, it is a privileged, unpublished document. If a reviewer uploads that into an LLM just to get a quick summary, they are breaching the confidentiality agreement.
They are feeding unpublished scientific data into a third-party commercial server.
Exactly. But the secondary reason touches on the fundamental purpose of peer review. AI lacks domain expertise and real-world lived experience.
A machine does not practice medicine.
Exactly. Therefore, it lacks the critical human judgment necessary to assess if a paper is genuinely novel or grasp the subtle ethical nuances of a clinical trial. It acts as an unhelpful black box.
The guide actually points out a massive hypocrisy developing here. They use the phrase rules for thee, but not for me. Journals fiercely insist that an AI cannot be an author because a machine lacks moral responsibility. Yet, some reviewers are tempted to use that exact same unaccountable machine to pass judgment on human authors.
It is a glaring double standard.
It's like submitting your novel to a publishing house, and instead of an editor reading it to see if it makes them feel something, they feed it to a robot to see if the word count is right. The author is held to the highest standard of human integrity, while the gatekeeper outsources their job to a machine.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, if we remove human judgment from the peer review process, we strip the system of its core value. An AI can spot a formatting error instantly, but it cannot tell you if a piece of research will fundamentally change how a doctor treats a patient.
Which begs the ultimate question. With all of these strict frameworks, the blurry definitions, the equity issues, and the hypocrisies of peer review, where is this actually heading? The guide looks to historical technological shifts to try and predict the future of AI disclosure.
And historical parallels are vital here. We have experienced massive technological disruptions before. The introduction of calculators, word processors, spreadsheets, and statistical packages like SPSS were all once disruptive.
There was a time when using a computer to run a statistical regression was seen as taking a shortcut.
Exactly. But today, no one declares they used Microsoft Word's spell check. It is entirely assumed. The authors predict that eventually, generative AI disclosures will likely become minimized, routine, or vanish entirely once the use is normalized.
But we are not there yet. We are in a transitional phase, and there is an urgent need for more research on the equity implications. We talked about how AI offers a fairer footing for multilingual scholars. The data shows a substantial proportion of authors disclosing AI tools are from the Global South.
And this creates the ultimate policy dilemma. We desperately need strict transparency to protect the epistemological truth. But if journals implement overly aggressive policing or ambiguous rules, strict disclosure policies risk disproportionately burdening multilingual scholars or those from less resourced institutions.
If the penalty for a mistake is having your paper rejected, the researchers who rely on the tools the most are the ones most at risk. We could exacerbate structural disparities.
To mitigate this, new AI-specific reporting guidelines are emerging across different disciplines. There is Gamer for general medical research, Consort AI for clinical trials, and Prisma AI for systematic literature reviews.
We are essentially trying to build the regulatory airplane while we are already flying it. We are in the messy middle. We are living in the 5 to 10 year window where we have to awkwardly announce, I used a computer to help me think. 50 years from now, people will look back at these journal declarations and laugh at how quaint we were.
The goal should be norms that promote transparency without perpetuating inequality. It is an incredibly delicate balancing act.
We've covered how these tools are normalizing, much like spellcheck did. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over, something building on this source material. We established that LLMs are trained by scraping human-generated text from the internet. But right now, the internet is being flooded with AI-generated text and AI-generated academic papers. If normalization means everyone uses these tools, we are heading toward a massive Ouroboros scenario, a technological snake eating its own tail.
Model collapse.
Exactly. In 5 years, When they train their next generation model, they will be scraping an internet saturated with the outputs of their previous models. If future researchers use AI tools trained on previous AI generated papers to write new AI generated papers, at what point does human knowledge stop expanding and simply start echoing itself in an endless, perfectly spelled, grammatically correct loop?
That is the ultimate existential question. If the silent collaborator becomes the only voice generating the text, what happens to the human pursuit of truth?
That is something to think carefully about the next time you open up a chat window. Paste in a few bullet points and ask the machine for just a little help phrasing an email. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.